No straw for you, says Starbucks. The company will now offer strawless beverages in a new cup design. We'll talk about it. Also, have you heard of Hermit Patty, who called the police on a 12-year-old girl for selling water on a hot day in Oakland? What's that all about? And we will lead with this, the Mandalay Massacre lawsuit battle. Mandalay Bay deciding to sue the victims of the Las Vegas slaughter done by Stephen Paddock. Hello there, Terry here on Think America. This is where we reason first and then converse. I'm Terry Gilberg, your host, and this is America's Radio Town Hall. I invite two everyday Americans to come on the show and mix it up with me. I give them thought-provoking conversation starters. They come from different backgrounds, different walks of life, and they have different approaches to the questions. Also, Megan the Millennial will be with us as well toward the end of the show. A shout out to our latest affiliate, KTAR in Phoenix. I want to welcome Martina to the program. She is a scientist in infectious diseases. Hello, Martina. Nice to have you.
Hello, Terry. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Thanks for coming on board. And we also have Mitch. Mitch is a small business owner and he specializes in video production. Hello, Mitch.
Hello, Terry.
Nice to have you on Think America. Let's get right to it. The Mandalay Massacre lawsuit battle, it has begun. Just like I said, Mandalay Bay deciding to sue the victims. Suing the victims, did you hear that right, of the Las Vegas slaughter done by Stephen Paddock. Well, what is this all about? They have hired attorneys, big law office out of Los Angeles, Munger, Tolles, and Olson, and they say they are representing MGM, which owns the Mandalay Bay, in the best possible way. They are now going to sue the victims as a way to limit MGM's liability. It seems extremely heartless, or maybe it's practical. Now, you may be sitting there thinking, wow, that's pretty odd that this company would sue the victims. MGM says the only way they can protect themselves against a series of defendant claims. Remember, 58 people died in that slaughter and hundreds were wounded. The only way they can do that is through a 2002 federal act that gives protection for any company that sued security that used security certified by Department of Homeland Security. And MGM did have that. They had such DHS security. So the victim attorneys say that is outrageous. It is heartless. Why in the world would you pull that stunt? Because the victim attorneys say that refers to security against terrorism. Think about that, folks, terrorism. And we don't know if Stephen Paddock was a terrorist yet or not. The FBI has not ruled out terror or ruled in terror. We don't know. Martina, how do you see it?
I think this is a PR nightmare myself. I used to live in Las Vegas, so I know that MGM has suffered financially since this tragedy occurred, and they really haven't recovered, particularly the Mandalay Bay. And although it seems to be somewhat preemptive that they're protecting their own cash flow, it really is a PR nightmare. And I think it's going to backfire because it just doesn't bode well to sue the victims preemptively and interpret the law this way. I'm no attorney, but I just think from a PR standpoint, this is not a good thing.
No, it's not a good thing. There's a lot of outrage that is going on, at least on social media. However, if they haven't ruled out Paddock's actions as terrorism or not, and if a big law office in Los Angeles has some of their top attorneys handling MGM, and if they can say, let's pull the trump card of the Federal Act 2002, this federal act that is it's called the Safety Act. It's got a big old long name, but it is supporting anti-terrorism by fostering effective technology 2002. Think of it just as the Safety Act of 2002. If they can pull that card, then they deflect a lot of liability and keep MGM alive. Mitch.
Well, everyone's reacting emotionally to this. I think it's more tactical than anything else, and I don't mean to come across, excuse me, as heartless, but You've got several issues here. First of all, I don't think the FBI is ever going to admit that this was terrorism, so I don't know how they're going to activate that clause. But the other issue is they're going to end up with lawsuits coming from as many states as they had people in. They're going to have to deal with all these municipalities, and their motivation seems to be to try to get this moved to the federal courts, and I know that's what this particular action does for them. So, they aren't suing.
It does move them to the federal courts for sure. And the other thing is that they want it under an MDL kind of situation, meaning that it's a multi-district litigation lawsuit. If they don't like the judge in Nevada, even at the federal level, Mitch, and there's some rumor that the attorneys don't like that federal judge because he or she wouldn't necessarily rule kindly for MGM, then if they can spread it around into multi-districts, they can have different judges. So indeed, it's a tactic. The question is it completely heartless? And the second question, I'll go back to you, Mitch, is this idea of terror. Maybe attorneys might know something that the public doesn't know. And so in court, they'll pull this is the Safety Act 2002. It is connected to terror, and the FBI and any other law enforcement doesn't want the public to know, but the attorneys may know, and it could be all behind the closed doors of the judge's quarters. What do you think about that angle?
Well, I think this entire thing is a mess. I mean, first of all, everybody's acting as though Stephen Paddock actually did this. I've seen nothing to indicate that they've been able to prove that. We don't know who did this, and I don't think they're ever going to tell us. I don't really know what went down here, but the fact that the federal government is so mum on this tells me there's a lot more going on to this than what people think. The second issue is this was predictable. I mean, people don't always file lawsuits. What happens is attorneys, as you know, do start chasing all of these people. I mean, it's the old joke of 99% of the attorneys give the 1% a bad name. They're not suing for money. MGM is not. That's the other issue that people need to keep an eye on this. In reading the victims' comments, one of their issues was, that they think the hotel is responsible for allowing him to bring all these cases up to his room and stockpile this arsenal. My question to them would be, one, do you want to have your luggage searched in Vegas like you do at the airport? And secondly, this is never going to work. I mean, Vegas is a trade show town. I have personally hauled an awful lot of large black cases up to my hotel room full of video equipment. So everybody's doing it. So I don't know how you're going to suddenly, fix this so that people can say, oh, look, he's only got one bag. He's fine.
What did you think when you were doing that at the time? Did you think there were security cameras on you? Did you think someone would rifle through all those cases? No pun there. When you were doing it, Mitch, what was your experience? Was it just open field? You can take whatever you want to up the elevators and into your room?
Well, sure, because one, you got a lot of international travelers, so they have lots of luggage to start with. Vegas is an international destination. And secondly, as I said, it's a trade show town. So everybody's dragging large cases in, and we're all dragging the same black, sort of Pelican cases that everybody saw in the pictures with Mr. Paddock. So, at this, I don't think they have the facility. You think the lines are long at the airport getting your luggage checked. I can't imagine what it would be like at the hotels if everybody's got to have all their stuff searched. So, I mean, we got a number of issues here we have to determine, how the way to handle this is. And I don't have the answers. I just have lots of questions.
Martina, how do you see it from the standpoint of the victims? The victims are there. They get shot from allegedly Stephen Paddock, and now they're suing the hotel and MGM. How do you see it? It sounds like Mitch is more sensitive to Munger, Tolles, and Olson's lawsuit protecting MGM.
Well, I have a personal investment in this. One of the young ladies that was killed was one of my former students at the university where I teach. And from her family standpoint, I can tell you they're very upset by this. But from legal terms in and of itself, the event was run by another company. MGM and Mandalay Bay supplied the room where Stephen Paddock stayed. And I think the victims in this case feel that somebody needs to be responsible for the fact that Stephen Paddock was up in that room. But to Mitch's earlier point, how do you solve that? How do you search everyone's luggage? I mean, it is a trade show town. And not only that, Stephen Paddock was very well known to the Mandalay Bay staff. He was a high roller. He was a frequent visitor. And it wasn't uncommon, I guess, for him to stay there, particularly in a suite. So they didn't think that there was anything weird about that. And apparently he brought his luggage up in bits and pieces. So from the victim's standpoint, I understand that they want to hold someone responsible, but who or what that party is remains to be seen, because there's just so many questions on how did
they do want to hold someone responsible, and they do want it in state court. And with this MGM move by this law firm, it's going out of state court to a federal level for protection. So that's because the lawsuits are coming right to MGM big time, and 58 people are dead. Hundreds of people have been wounded. There's law enforcement that was wounded as well, paralyzed and so forth. So clearly, all of these people, and they don't have a class action yet, but all of these people are looking at Mandalay Bay. Perhaps they're suing, and I haven't read all the individual lawsuits, good Lord, but perhaps they're suing because, in fact, the windows weren't strong enough to stop a bullet from coming out of the window. There's all kinds of ways lawyers can beef up a lawsuit. But the idea that they're making this chess move to the federal level looks to me like a huge move to deflect MGM from any liability and hide behind this Safety Act 2002. And if they can tell a judge, FBI has talked to us and it's a terrorist situation or potential terrorist, or that's what we believe, they might get away with it. It seems to me totally heartless and very practical for the lawyers and the Mandalay Bay and MGM. Mitch.
Well, to Martina's point, it is a PR nightmare, and it's not that I don't have sensitivity for the victims here, but to Martina's other point, who should we be suing? I mean, the people that ran the event that's across the street and on the ground. I mean, the question is this, and I know why they want to go to federal court. Can you imagine trying a series of these cases in state courts? And where do we have activist judges at the lower court levels? So you're going to have all these different states, and you're going to have all these activist judges who aren't going to be paying attention to the law. They're going to be ruling emotionally like we've seen them do time and time again. I understand the reason for wanting to go to federal court. I'll tell you what I think would help. It would help a great deal if the government would make some sort of determination. And we're not children. We can handle the truth. The government should step forward and tell us what happened exactly so everyone can understand where liability lays. And as for the hotel, the issue and the reason they passed this law from 2002, this is my understanding, perhaps I have it wrong, is that you cannot get insurance for certain things like acts of terrorism. So they came up with this law that said if you've got this, you've got some coverage.
I need to wrap it right there, Mitch. We're a little over. I appreciate your take on it. Thank you, Mitch. Thank you, Martina. I'm Terry Gilberg. We are Think America. Back with more. We're back on Think America. I'm Terry Gilberg. This is a show where we reason first, then converse. Had a robust conversation on the Mandalay Massacre lawsuit battle. And I loved what Mitch had to say, sort of taking a different side from my point of view, plus Martina. They're my Terry's talkers for this edition of Think America. You can also find us at thinkamericaradio.com. I want to move on now to another thought-provoking conversation starter. Martina, no straw for you. If you and I go to Starbucks soon anyway and want something to drink, we will not get a straw. So how do we drink a Starbucks? Especially because a lot of the beverages are very, very hot. Well, the company has now a new cup design, and it's kind of got a lip. It too is plastic. So it's also eco-friendly, but it's also more plastic, it seems to me. Already, individuals and groups for individuals with disabilities are speaking up against this, and they're not complimentary of Starbucks. The reason is those groups that are representing disabled folks say the disabled, some of them anyway, need a straw to help them drink. Now, Starbucks is a little embarrassed about this. They're trying to find this new design so they're eco-friendly. I don't think they hit the mark. They upset many groups that are representing the folks that are disabled. Plus, they've got this new cup design that is using as much plastic, it seems to me, as a straw. Your take?
I agree with you, Terry, and I think this is another PR nightmare. But I do think that the individuals with disabilities do have a point, because if you stand in line at Starbucks, oftentimes you'll see people, even young children, that require a straw to drink. So this could also be a sales tactic where they will start selling recyclable straws. I can see that, a bamboo straw for $10, buy it at Starbucks and reuse it in your beverages. From what I understand as well, they've tried the no straw policy on areas that are close to beaches because they were having a problem with beach pollution related to plastic straws. But to your point, I don't think it's really going to save any plastic, and it's certainly going to be a huge inconvenience.
I tend to agree. Starbucks is holding firm, or at least they were right at the beginning. But then when they got this pushback from groups that are representing those that are disabled that actually need a straw, then they say, okay, well, now we'll offer straws to folks who actually request them. But that means that if you're a person who is disabled, maybe you don't have good motor function, maybe you're in a wheelchair, you're paralyzed, you can't request it. You're not going to get your straw. I think it's another PR nightmare, Mitch.
Well, I shouldn't be laughing, but this is just classic of Starbucks. Everything they do is a knee-jerk reaction. I mean, they're an anti-Second Amendment company, so they decided not to serve cops. That blew up in their face. Then they converted their stores to virtual halfway houses, and that blew up. And then this forced sensitivity training thing blew up, and now they've raced this straw thing out without bothering to do much in the way of research. And here we are again. I mean, they're about as predictable as the weather.
It would be one thing if they said, we are totally eco. That means you bring your own cup. Just like if you go to, Trader Joe's and you bring your own bag to have your groceries put in your bag, and you save paper and you get 10 cents return because you brought your own dang bag. Okay. Why can't I bring my own coffee cup? Why not? I don't get it. I tend to agree with you, Mitch. It's sort of silly. They're trying to please all the people all the time and be progressive, trendy, whatever. They had that fiasco with the bathroom. Oh my goodness, in Philadelphia. A person can't walk in, and while you're waiting for all the people to get their order in, you can't use the bathroom because what? You haven't bought anything yet? Operative word, yet. It is ridiculous. And how many people sit in there and just use it as their personal office? Isn't that what Starbucks wanted? This whole plastic thing, look, if plastic is bad, then introduce paper. But then they say paper, we can't have paper because paper melts because the beverage is too hot, and metal is too hot. That's not good either. So now we're going to do this sort of a sippy cup lip. It looks like you're drinking from a child. I mean, they're getting all bogged down in the weeds with all of the transport system to drink your dang beverage. I mean, for crying out loud, I'll go to another coffee shop because I don't want to go through all the rigmarole, stand in line for forever and pay $4 for drip, Martina.
Well, they're probably going to raise the price of the cup because it'll take more to manufacture those cups. So odds are they're going to raise the price, 50 cents to $1 per cup of coffee for the new redesign. I think it's ridiculous. And to Mitch's point, they seem to have a knee-jerk reaction to everything, and they're trying to please the public and look very trendy and very hip, but it ends up backfiring. And I'd like to know about the other stuff that they have there. I mean, how are you going to stir your coffee? Things like that. So is it all plastic? Is it some plastic straws? What is it?
Mitch,
Can I make a prediction?
Sure.
Can I make a prediction? This is not about the environment. This is about money. I mean, Marriott's doing the same thing. They disperse 1 billion straws and 250 million stirrers every year. That's a lot of money. I think this is about money. I don't think it's about the environment.
That's a very good point. Interesting for our listeners. Marriott is now following suit, and perhaps other big hotel chains will do it as well. But okay, so it's about money. but it's the PC angle that it's about the environment. And then, of course, those folks that are disabled say, wait a minute, what about me? I'm over here. I can't really reach. Maybe I'm in a wheelchair. Maybe I can't speak. Maybe I need a helpmate. I need a straw. All right, let's break there. We'll be back with a robust discussion with Colonel Douglas Macgregor. Be right back. Turning our attention now on Think America with Terry Gilberg to my special guest, Colonel Douglas Macgregor. You've seen him. He does a lot of national media, a lot of television, a lot of radio. He is a highly decorated U.S. Army retired colonel and the executive vice president of Burke Macgregor. His recent book, Margin of Victory, is a must-read. Colonel Macgregor, let's get right to some of these hot issues of the day. I want to start first and foremost with Afghanistan. In September of 2017, President Trump did a surge of 4,000 troops into Afghanistan. And I sat back and went, say what? This sounds like Obama. It sounds like something Obama would do. And now it's, well, do we have an end goal? We've been there 17 years now. Al-Qaeda was birthed in Pakistan some 25 years ago. We've been fighting now since 9/11, 17 years, is it? I don't know how many trillions of dollars, maybe upwards $4 trillion. And what are we doing? I thought Trump was all about getting out.
Well, I think he is. The problem for President Trump was that shortly after he was elected, he turned to a group of Bush-Obama general officers, people that were promoted under the Clinton-Bush-Obama years, for their unquestioning obedience to dumb policies and dumb ideas. In fact, you could go so far as to suggest that the Secretary of Defense, his chief of staff, and certainly McMaster, who was his national security advisor, were all ideologues of the left, committed to sustained combat everywhere to maintain this hopelessly expensive, unnecessary territorial empire that has been built over the last several decades. So I think that was the problem. I think President Trump wants to get out. He's got to make some changes in the Defense Department at the top. He's got to recognize generals are not his friends, and they're not selfless patriots. They're part of the problem. And when he does that, I think you'll see everything change, and we'll leave Afghanistan, which is an abysmal failure.
Well, when you say they're not patriots, what exactly, Colonel, do you mean? Do you mean they don't love America, or do you mean their promotion and rank and being part of the establishment is good for their wallet and good for their career, rather than being truly patriotic to America?
Well, I think you got it right with the second part of your sentence. And people who are preeminently concerned about promoting themselves and advancing, regardless of the circumstances and the truthful conduct of operations, those kinds of people are really not patriots. And they present themselves as such, but if they were, they would see the facts and they would do what President Trump wanted to do a year ago, which was get out. Instead, they all closed ranks against Donald Trump. And remember, this president, like most presidents, has no military experience, and he was very reluctant to overrule his general officers. Well, I think he's gotten an education. He recognizes that they always come back with the same answer. Give us more money, give us more troops. Mm-hmm. And what you've said over the last 20 years is failure. So I think he understands that, but he's got to get rid of them. He's got to appoint new military leadership, new people in the Department of Defense. Otherwise, nothing will change.
When do you think he could do that? And when do you think he will get us out? And what will the landscape look like when we're out?
Well, he could appoint new leadership tomorrow morning. He has absolute authority over the Department of Defense. That's the least of his worries. There are, over 1,000 general officers out there from which to select. None of them are special people. They're all products of the last 25 or 30 years. So he can do pretty much whatever he wants. And he needs a new Secretary of Defense, someone who's not part of the problem. And he's got some candidates there who are not former military types. The second part is that if we leave Afghanistan tomorrow morning, then Iran, Russia, Pakistan, and India will have to contend with the place. And I think that's a good thing. It's in their region. It's their problem. We never needed to stay in that country to begin with. We only had one mission. That was to go after Osama bin Laden and a few hundred people. The Bush and Obama administrations expanded that to, if you're with me, you're my friend. If you're not, you're my enemy, in which case we ended up with lots of enemies.
I agree with you on all of that. I want to segue from that thought into what your take is on the Helsinki summit with Putin. Do you think any of the themes that we just talked about, Colonel, had anything to do with the private conversation with Putin, that you either start looking at it from the United States' point of view and being our help, or we're out of here, and if we do get out, we will help you, but you got to help us on terror in other places, Syria, quit being Kim Jong-un's best friend or whispering in his ear, and all these other factors geopolitically that might have something to do. What's your take on Helsinki vis-a-vis Afghanistan and talking to Putin? Anything?
Well, the first thing is to remember that whether we like Mr. Putin or not, and even though Russia has an economy smaller than South Korea's, Mr. Putin has 7,000 nuclear weapons, and he's investing every marginal ruble that he can get his hands on in the conventional armed forces in Russia. So you have to talk to the Russians for those reasons, barring anything else. I think there was probably an agreement to disagree on a number of areas and a search for common ground, which is what Mr. Trump said he was going to do with everyone. And I think the common ground in this case is really Syria. And that's because Mr. Trump has wisely kept us out of the Syrian debacle. Mr. Putin would like to get out of the Syrian debacle as well. Everyone in the region would like an end to the fighting and instability in that country. And I think the two of them have agreed that Mr. Assad and his government can stay. But at the same time, there must be a security zone on the northern border of Israel that runs around Jordan and also down through Saudi Arabia that prevents the Iranians from using Syria as a platform from which to attack Israel and Saudi Arabia. And I think he and Mr. Putin agreed to that. As for the rest of it, there's not much he can do at this point other than talk. And I think that's why he wants to have regularly scheduled discussions with Mr. Putin in the future.
I think that that's wise, too, for all of the naysayers to say, don't talk to him. I say, keep enemies closer. Let me move on, Colonel, and talk a little bit about the border, especially the southern border. You've been very outspoken about how the military on the border can help do the job to curb illegal immigration, especially since we have yet to see a border wall, something that, of course, was campaigned on and promised, that the National Guard is just not equipped. So describe a little bit more your philosophy of putting the military on the border and for how long.
Well, first, I think your listeners should understand that from 1846, after the first Mexican War that we fought, until 1948, the border was under the direct control of the United States Army. And by that, I mean the regular army. All of the generals of the Second World War, Eisenhower, Patton, any number of them, pick a name, they all served on the Mexican border. That was a regular duty for the regular army. And we did that because Mexico has been a source of instability, criminality, turmoil, revolution, civil war, almost from its inception, from the moment the Spaniards left the place. And during the Cold War, Mexico, of course, was an outpost for the Soviet Union, the KGB. In World War I, the Mexicans turned to the Germans because the Mexicans have felt unending hostility towards the United States and North America, English-speaking North America, again, almost from its inception. Putting the regular army on the border was something that President Trump had the authority to do the day he was inaugurated. He is the chief executive of the military. He has absolute authority over the military and the armed forces. And it has nothing to do with this thing called posse comitatus, which comes up routinely for discussion, which is about the use of federal forces inside the United States to assist the police. It's all about keeping illegal border crossers, intruders, and criminals out of the United States. That's something that he should do. And he should say that I am going to maintain the regular army on the border until there is a barrier in place that is adequate, that can then allow the restoration of the border to the control of civil authorities and police.
It would also help against drug trafficking and these caravans of migrants that are coming in claiming asylum.
Absolutely. And that's all entirely nonsense. Those people should never have been allowed to enter the country. Again,
well, I agree with you there. And this push by attorneys to get them over the border and then all of the separation issues that have followed. We're down to about 30 seconds. I'll give you the last word, Colonel.
Well, I hope your listeners understand that this illegal immigration is all about creating a voting base that can never be overturned by America's core population. That's really what it's about. Secondly, we've got to get the United States Army focused on defending first and foremost the United States. We don't need to defend Syria's border, Afghanistan's border, Iraq's border, or anyone else's border.
And frankly, I'm with you, agreeing with you, and I think he should too. We need to leave it there. Thank you, Colonel, so much for being on the program. Colonel Douglas Macgregor, his book, Margin of Victory. Appreciate you very much. Thank you. And we're back on Think America, thinkamericaradio.com. I'm Terry Gilberg. Thanks again to Colonel Douglas Macgregor and his insight on Afghanistan. What'd you think, Mitch?
Well, I thought it was amazing that he came out and actually said that the big issue is all these Bush-Obama officers as he's inherited. I commend him for having the integrity to do that. Listen, Obama fired literally over 140 flag officers with serious combat experience. We've got an awful lot of people in the Corps here now that do not have that level of experience, and I don't think he's getting good advice. I never liked McMaster's from day one, and I am really lukewarm on General Kelly.
Martina, your take.
I thought it was an amazing interview in that it provided a lot of common sense and historical perspective of why the southern border needs to be protected by the Army as it had been in the past, and that Afghanistan has sadly been a waste of resources and human tragedy.
Well, when it was 4,000 surge, I thought, well, what is this all about? And I happen to know a couple of people that are there, and they're wrapping up their deployment. They were reservists that were called up. All right. Thanks for that. Let's move on. Have you heard of Permit Patty, who called the police on a 12-year-old girl for selling water on a hot day in Oakland? The girl didn't have a permit. Permit Patty calls the police. The incident is not unusual, however. Another incident in Charleston, South Carolina, an adult called police on a boy. He was selling roses without a permit. And then there's other instances across America, people calling police on a 12-year-old for summer lawn mowing business. What is going on that adults are ratting out kids? It seems stupid, but in the 3 cases that I just described, the regulations and those who called were for health and safety. So those people that called said, this is not healthy and this is not safe. Martina.
This reminds me of that show Bewitched, where they had Mrs. Kravitz, the nosy neighbor that got into everybody's business. It's ridiculous, and it crushes the entrepreneurial spirit of these young people. I mean, I remember as a kid holding down different jobs, and it was part of a learning experience and socializing with people and earning a few extra bucks over summer. It was a wonderful experience. And to their point, well, maybe it has to do with liability or health issues that might be related to serving lemonade, but really a permit for bottled water? Come on.
Mitch.
Precisely. Mowing somebody's lawn presents absolutely no health scare or health concerns whatsoever. Now, if you're selling water that's not in bottles and things like that, I could understand the concern, but bottled water is not an issue. And I'm pretty sure that selling flowers is not going to threaten anyone's health. I find this amusing. The take on this was these are adults calling. I don't think these are adults. I think these are left-wing loons, okay? And these people, want to control every aspect of your life. To Martina's point, the thing about entrepreneurialism, we're losing it in this country, especially among young people. So on the one hand, we want to encourage this. On the other hand, I can see the flip side where people say, hey, this kind of creates a lopsided market. What about all those businesses that have permits? There's got to be some middle ground. I mean, if they're kids, that's one thing. I mean, do we want to start allowing adults to do it too? And this leads back into this whole notion that we have overregulation in this country. It's endemic, and it leads to more and more unpermitted businesses that are run by adults. So I think we just need to retweak this whole formula.
You know, what strikes me is that on the one side, many people in America complain that children aren't getting outdoors. I read an article just the other day that said something about per week they're outdoors, maybe 5 to 7 hours outdoors. They don't skin their knees. They don't swing on tire trees. The tire swings. They can't. Well, it was brought up with the Thai cave rescue. Boys will be boys. They're going to run into caves. All right. Things happen, but it's all part of sort of parenting so that kids can figure out the big, wide, wonderful world. And yes, there's risks and so forth. If I'm a parent and you're for this kind of regulation, then don't come to me later. If you're a parent, don't come to me later and say, well, I'm so mad that, my kid can't do this or can't do that, because you're part of the problem. You're absolutely right, Mitch. The regulations are over the top. They're out of control. We don't let kids be kids. They're not maturing. They're becoming sissified. Many are couch potatoes and getting fat at computer games, and they're just not exploring the world. And then parents later on say, well, what happened? I don't understand my kid. I don't get it. They never had that opportunity. They didn't have the opportunity because we've become over-regulated. It's stifling.
Absolutely. I agree with every point you just made. This permit Patty person apparently has a degree in urban planning, so she might have been upset about the competition here.
All right, let's take a break from that. Megan the Millennial, straight ahead. She'll comment on this and also have the segment Change Your Life Technology. Megan Port, straight ahead. We're back on Think America. ThinkAmericaRadio.com is where you can find all of our archive shows and all of our unique segments with Megan Porth, our Megan the Millennial, who does your Change Your Life Technology. She's with us now. She's an attorney. She's libertarian. She is our Megan the Millennial. Have you heard about Permit Patty, Megan? We were just talking with Terry's talkers on this topic. They called the police on a 12-year-old girl for selling water on a hot day. There's other instances where kids are mowing lawns. They're trying to work at the state fair and they're bumping into all kinds of regulations. What about just babysitting? There's all kinds of things that we don't allow our young people to do when they're trying to be sort of entrepreneurial and understanding commerce and marketing and finance and a little bit of economics too, because we throw regulations at them. And in this case, this Permit Patty called the police on a 12-year-old girl for selling water on a hot day in Oakland. They all cite every single time health and safety. How do you see it?
This is the exact repercussions of the nanny state, Terry. This is what I talk about a lot. When it comes to the state police powers, they can focus a lot on health and safety and decide that, oh, wow, this is how we're keeping everyone safe. We have to have all of these regulations to protect the consumer. Like, we are all so stupid, we can't understand. Buying water from a little girl on the side of the street doesn't mean that it hasn't been tested by the EPA in some way. But I don't think that this is crushing the entrepreneurial spirit. Millennials are absolutely, utterly obsessed with entrepreneurship. So that's really good. What I think is really happening here is that we are relying so heavily on the police power to understand what's happening in our communities. We don't have a connection to our neighbors. We don't have a connection to our communities. So we are calling the police on little kids who are performing small tasks. There were people who were calling the police and trying to get regulations for little kids who were doing lemonade stands, Terry. And there's a movement around the country to try to promote this kind of work, because this is exactly what we're saying the issue is that we are stifling and killing children's drive, their entrepreneurial spirit, their ability to get out in front of their community, to speak intelligently about a product. And if we overly regulate them, this is what the result looks like. In law school, I wrote a long paper that no one ever read, of course, about occupational regulations and the dangers of those. There's a phenomenal law practice that's called the Institute for Justice. They actually litigate these cases pro bono to try to free up some of the occupational regulations that are out there, because these laws are written so broadly, as you cited, health and safety, that can include just about every single thing you can imagine. And people are trying to predict out the potential things that could happen. Oh my gosh, what if she didn't wash her hands properly and she touched the bottle of water? I could get sick from that. So there is nothing that doesn't fall under the purview of health and safety. And that is why it's so dangerous. It is way too broad, way too general. And I think it's because of the nanny state. I think this is the result.
How do we stop the nanny state, though?
How do we turn the Titanic, Terry?
I think we're pretty far gone. I mean, even you can say a kid that's mowing a lawn, well, he could mow over his feet and then not have feet. He could mow over, I don't know, the dog. I don't know how to unring that bell.
So a lot of times what we do is, especially if you look at the Institute for Justice, they are asking the legislatures, as the state legislatures, as well as the courts, to rule in favor of labor. And unfortunately, this started with the Supreme Court many, many years ago, where labor was not a constitutionally protected class. So we aren't able to say, hey, labor should get the deference over the legislature. So what we need our legislatures. We need to lobby our state legislatures to carve these things out, to make sure the occupational regulatory boards are as narrow and specific as possible, not broadly written.
I would also say let everybody read your college papers. Those things get buried and there's gold in those things.
Nobody read it.
I know. I have college papers too that I got A's on and nobody read them except the prof. Okay.
In their defense, it's 45 pages long. So.
All right. This edition of Change Your Life Technology, which we're going to segue into right now, is brought to you by yourcontractshop.com with Megan Porth. Go ahead.
So extinction is such an interesting topic, Terry, especially when it's something that we've done. For instance, the Tasmanian tiger was actually rendered extinct in 1982 because humans were hunting it. But the University of Melbourne is actually using sequencing on the genome of the Tasmanian tiger to try to bring it back. They believe that they've made some progress in the cloning, and many of the researchers believe that since it was humans who caused the extinction, that it's humans who should bring them back. They're a little far from bringing back the Tasmanian tiger completely, but we're seeing a lot of movement in this direction. So I always picture Jurassic Park. I mean, we're going to have a Tyrannosaurus Rex soon.
Find Megan at yourcontractshop.com, and always on this program, Think America, reason first, then converse. Thank you to Martina. Thank you to Mitch and Colonel Macgregor. We loved having all of you on. See you next time. Does the company that claims it's in the business of making dreams come true, the Disney company, are they doing the same for their own employees? We'll talk about it. And the expense of weddings is going up and up and up due to the popularity of the recent royal wedding, but most Americans just can't afford what those royals can. Plus, Melania Trump, she made between $100,000 to upwards $1 million on pictures. And the left is going crazy about it. We'll talk about it. Hello there, Terry here on Think America, where we reason first and then converse. I'm Terry Gilberg, your host, and this is America's Radio Town Hall. I invite two everyday Americans to come on the show with me and mix it up. I give them thought-provoking conversation starters, where there's really no wrong answer, but we do go deep and broad into the topics. And these people come from different backgrounds, different walks of life, and that's what makes the conversation from them interesting. Also, Megan the Millennial is also with us. She comes into the program toward the end, so stick around for that. She does a cameo on the program. Shout out to our latest affiliate, KTAR in Phoenix, and our radio partners, our national syndicator, Radio America in D.C. First up, I want to say hello to Martina. Martina is a scientist with infectious diseases. Welcome to the program, Martina.
Hi, Terry. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you for coming on. Mitch, he is with us. He is a small business owner in videography. Hello, Mitch.
Pleasure to be here.
All right, let's start with you first, Mitch. Illegals are registering to vote in San Francisco. Many people say this is outrageous, but it's been a long time coming. I say, look at it, San Francisco. It's not shocking to see. San Francisco is a sanctuary city. And illegals are registered to vote, or at least are trying anyway, even outside San Francisco as well. In the San Francisco area, it's for the school board. And if you're over 18 and you're a city resident, you got children under 19, San Francisco says, well, that gets parents interested in their education. Who cares about them being illegal? What do you think?
I'm 100% totally against this. If I might paraphrase, to me, this looks like representation without taxation. The majority of non-citizens and illegals pay little to no taxes, and voting, in my opinion, is a core function and should require citizenship. But I understand what the end game is. This is how they crack the door open. They say, we're just going to let them vote in local elections. We both know the odds of these people not voting in a national election is basically too slim and none.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Martina.
I agree with Mitch. I'm 100% against this. I'm not surprised, having been in San Francisco recently on business and seeing the urban campers parked outside my hotel. But it's the idea that they're just building up their voting base, and the liberals will never release that town. It's in total violation of federal law. And frankly, I think if they do this, they should clamp down on the federal funding that's provided to San Francisco.
There's a lot of talk about that, but I don't know about how you two feel. But where is Jeff Sessions? We never hear from him. He's MIA. I get the whole Russia connection. Who doesn't? I mean, it's Russia, Russia, Russia all day long. But for a while there, he came out of the woodwork and said, we, meaning as the AG and this administration, is going to pull federal funding. But when I read stories like this on how San Francisco is thumbing their nose at this, and it was a ballot measure in 2016, and now it's coming to fruition, it's like, did Jeff Sessions move the needle at all on this? What about the Trump administration? Why is the effect of this in favor of the illegal that wants to now vote for a school board and in favor of San Francisco, when this administration with Jeff Sessions doing a non-Russia issue is not stronger? I don't get it, Mitch.
Well, Jeff Sessions' face is on the side of a milk carton. There's no question about that. I mean, he's gone road, retired on active duty. I don't expect much from him at all. But the thing I found interesting about this is that apparently this was their third try to get this passed. So apparently not everyone in San Francisco supports this, because if it takes 3 times to get something passed and it barely passes then.
You're correct. That's correct.
I would say you don't have the widespread support. But for me, some of the shocking things were the comments of some of these supervisors and stuff. You know, why would we not want our parents invested in education? Well, I don't know. How come? Because they don't pay property taxes, which is what pays for the schools? I mean, you know, this is like that old thing, you know, if you don't help make the bread, you don't get to eat some.
Well, and it's all the spin. It's the PC spin. It's like education. It's for the children. It's their children. It reminds me of the whole caravan haul. Oh, separating parents from children. That was the mantra that we heard for this past month. We're still hearing it. But it's never the other side that says, wait a minute, we need to vet if that adult is in fact the parent. That person could in fact be a human smuggler. And those are being caught. And that's the whole point. This idea that it's always for the children and it's so heartfelt and they need parental involvement, et cetera, is the spin. It's the PC way of looking at everything rather than what is illegal, what isn't. You're absolutely right, Mitch. It was run up the flagpole twice prior and it was defeated. And third time, well, now it became a ballot measure for 2016. The ballot measures, Martina, are becoming more and more and more. Haven't you noticed? It's not going through the legislative process there in Sacramento. It seems like everything is now just grab a ballot measure, get enough signatures, and activists will try to legislate that way.
I agree. And I think what's interesting to point out is that with all of these ballot measures, even if some of them pass, and that's the will of the people, they're overturned in court. Think about the number of instances where states have voted for English only to be overturned. So the will of the people is ignored when it's convenient. for whoever's in the voting base, whatever they're interested in.
Well, that's another good point. Back to Mitch's point about this is a crack in the door. It's an open, it's getting one foot in the door. I think you referenced that way. This third time, Mitch, was 54% of the vote. Think about that. 54% of the vote. And now they're pushing to have everybody make sure they're registered to vote, which that deadline, by the way, is October 22nd for an election on November 6th. It's chipping away, chipping away, chipping away. And by the way, just for the listener, this is also being chipped away, this idea of illegals registering to vote in other cities. There are Maryland cities currently where get the illegals registered to vote, chip away, chip away, chip away, and make sure that the person is over 18, make sure that the person is a city resident, make sure that they have children under 19 that are in school, going to school, etc. Of course, using all goods and services and being here illegally, but nonetheless, Maryland cities are doing this as well, trying to work. Now, not all of these little referendums in ballot measures in Maryland have been adopted by the state lawmakers, but it's a way to chip away, Mitch.
Well, yes, and they already have a lot of illegals registered to vote in various places in California now. So it wouldn't surprise me if at least 4% of that 54 were in fact these people. So, I mean, did it in fact pass? I guess that's a philosophical question.
Yeah, I understand. Do you think this kind of warrants a lot of the hard Trump talk, which is see stuff like this? Do you think Trump is finding his right metronome in his response to stuff like this, or has he kind of dropped the ball, Mitch?
No, I think this plays right into his hands, actually. I have a lot of conversations with different business owners, and everyone is just of the opinion that California they don't need to fall off in the ocean. They've already fallen off metaphorically. I mean, people just cannot relate to anything going on in San Francisco. They've got all their convention people canceling because of the health conditions and all the people on the street and all the feces. And then they got stuff like this. And it's just every time you think they can't go any farther left, you're just certain they're against the bump stop. They come through with something else. The state is lost as far as so many of us are concerned. And, you know, I'm like so many people that used to visit there all the time. I haven't been to California in 5 years, and unless it's business related, I won't go there.
Well, back to San Francisco, Martina, and back to Mitch's point, San Francisco is utterly ill-affordable, period. I have relatives, a young nephew, in fact, that was living at the marina. He had 5 roommates. It was cheek to jowl. He was living in the kitchen. But because the rent for this flat that they had near the marina was so extraordinary, they piled 5 guys. He finally left. And his rent now is $3,800 a month. He was talking to me and says, I don't know how to do this. I can't get ahead. What am I going to do? He's talking to his boss about living somewhere else and doing business in commercial real estate, but with a laptop and the mobility that he wants to manifest to his boss. He says, you know, I can look at commercial real estate all throughout the United States with my laptop. Why do I have to be in San Francisco, even though this is where the company is located? They're losing these young people because it is so ill-affordable.
Well, they're losing young people that have adequate jobs that could pay for places like that. But I had a similar conversation with the doorman at the hotel where I was staying in San Francisco. And what was interesting, I said, how do you afford to live here? And he looked at me and he said, to be honest, there are 12 of us sharing a very small space. And we're stacked on top of one another, mostly family members. And I said, well, is that the case? And I suspected that he was in this country illegally. And he said, that is the case, that many of us have to live essentially on top of each other. And we're paying a huge amount of rent. And for what?
Well, this is the situation. I mean, Mitch referenced hygiene and the look of the streets and everybody kind of hustling, but there's no quality of life anymore in San Francisco. And I would say I agree with Mitch. By extension, the bloom's off the rose for the entire state of California. I haven't visited Sacramento recently, and the outer areas, the more eastern part or north up to Tahoe, up to Lake Tahoe. But I know Los Angeles pretty well. I know San Francisco very well, and that Grapevine area as well. If you're out there in Monterey and Carmel, you better be a millionaire because you can't get by. So I don't know what the answer is. California is so far, they've sunk their heels in so far, they don't want to turn back, at least those in power don't. But it is killing the state, Mitch. It's just killing the state, and it's so sad to see.
Absolutely. And it's not just young people moving. People that have serious property investment are leaving. You know, it's always amusing to me to see, you can tell what's going on with the city by how much a U-Haul truck costs. If it's outrageously expensive to leave the city, but you can rent one and drive it to the city for like pennies on the dollar, that tells you there's a lot of people renting trucks and a lot of people leaving. And that's precisely what's happening to them right now.
We'll leave it there. The school board, though, is going to see illegals making decisions in San Francisco, I'm afraid. Straight ahead, a discussion about Melania Trump. She made between $100,000 in 2017, but upwards to $1 million right at the turn of 2018. Why is this? It happens to be how she has sold family pictures. We'll discuss straight ahead. I'm Terry Gilberg, ThinkAmericaRadio.com. Welcome back to Think America, where we reason first, then converse. I'm Terry Gilberg. I'm delighted to have Mitch and Martina, two Terry's talkers in our radio town hall format, come on the program with us. I want to segue into this other thought-provoking conversation starter, Melania Trump. Everybody likes to talk about her. This time it isn't her beauty so much, but I would say it's her brains. She made in 2017, on the cusp of 2018, between $100,000 upwards to $1 million, believe it or not, from pictures. And many of the left-leaning media types are freaking out over this. Big media is shocked, but they weren't watching the shop, as it were. Here's the story. It's because many news sources unwittingly contributed to her source of revenue. She has an arrangement with Getty Images in which she gets paid for the use of almost 200 family photos shot by a certain photographer out of Belgium. All right, very good. So Yahoo News, NBC News, Daily Mail, Houston Chronicle, and I also think it's the Los Angeles Times. I'm not certain about that. They are some of the companies that paid for these photos. You know, if you go to stock photos and it's a Getty image, oh, there's a great image. And so they've used it. Well, guess what? Some of these images have a subscription associated with it that lists the list price. And it also gives this caveat that the user will not be able to download without prior negotiation, first of all. And secondly, the user must use positive stories only if you use that image. So say for the sake of conversation, Melania is walking by a tennis court, or she's with Barron, her son, and they're traveling somewhere, or she's at one of the luxury homes that they have. If you don't write a positive story that matches that visual, you can't use the picture. Wow. All right. Well, no wonder some of the leftist big media, Mitch, mad about this. And it's her money. And by the way, one little footnote before I take your take on this, Mitch. These were photos done in large part with this licensing agreement far prior to her husband becoming the president.
Absolutely. First of all, I shouldn't be laughing, but the left has perfected shooting themselves in the backside. I mean, this is Trump derangement syndrome at its finest. They got the photo. Their focus was getting the photo. They used the photo. But the fact that she ended up with some of the money suddenly is the problem. Talk about getting misaligned on your priorities. This is something I deal with in my business all the time, and everyone that uses Getty Images knows that they're a stock house, and they know that royalties are going to be paid to whoever provided the photo or whoever has the rights to it. The other thing I found so amusing is that NBC I don't know who's running that place, but they claim that, we never signed a use agreement. Well, good luck with that, because in order to buy the photo, you've got to click yes on that. And they're claiming they can use it for everything they want. Well, it's very clear. It says no tabloids, positive stories only, needs photographer approval, and it's got a minimum fee of $500 per use. I mean, how do you not understand that? If I understand it, how does NBC's legal department not understand it?
They do understand it, and here's how they're spinning it. They're saying, wait a minute, now you're trying to dictate what story we write. We're the objective media, which of course we know that NBC is not, sadly. But now you want us to write to the video or write to the still. And these are terms in broadcasting and in print media. You write to picture. We're not going to write to picture, because now you're controlling our free speech, Martina. That's how they're spinning it.
That is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, so select other photos. There are hundreds of photos of Melania Trump that they could select. And I say good for her. Not only is this image management, but she did it well before she was first lady. And to me, I look at it as protecting her image, but also protecting her son, such that these photos must be shown in a positive light. I mean, it's not like she sold uranium or cattle futures. Maybe that would have gone over better on a way to earn her money.
The media personnel continue to be upset about this. Mitch hit it on the head. You hit it on the head, in my opinion, both of you. Martina, you're saying, let her make money. This is her contract. This is what you get. You got to do a positive story. And they have this nutty feeling about her, only because she is married to President Trump and they really hate President Trump. I don't notice a lot, Martina, that they hate her, except by extension.
I agree. I think they dislike her by extension. And after all, she earned her living as a model. So this, to Mitch's point, is not unheard of to have costs for stock images that are used in whatever story. So I say to NBC, select different photos if you don't like the ones you have to pay for.
Mitch.
Absolutely. I mean, they paid to have the photographs taken in the first place by this European photographer. They own them and the photographer. This is simple stuff. I mean, this is basic 101.
And you know a lot about that because you're in that game in general as a videographer, a small business owner.
I do. I buy them.
Right. I appreciate all of your thoughts on that. Just one little footnote. One of those pictures actually sold for $14 at a White House gift shop. So there you go. Maybe there's a picture that will sell even more. I know you can send pictures into Daily Mail and they'll pay high fees for them too. So good for her. All right, quick break. When we come back, we will be talking about the extravagant costs of weddings, and it's going up due to the popularity of the recent royal wedding. I'm Terry Gilberg. Be right back. We're back on Think America with Terry Gilberg and my Terry's Radio Talkers. Megan will be with us, but Martina, and let me do that whole segment again. Oh, I thought we were getting okay. Straight ahead on Think America, the high cost of weddings. Why is it going up? Due to the popularity of the recent royal wedding. We'll have a conversation with Terry's Talkers straight ahead. We're back on Think America with Terry Gilberg. You can find us at thinkamericaradio.com. Martina is with us and Mitch is with us. I know that the cost of weddings, and I just went to one, is going up. And this is in some measure, according to the Houston Bridal Extravaganza show, due to the royal wedding. They call it the Meghan Markle effect. I think it's typical of any time you have these fairy tale weddings, whether it was Lady Di's wedding, again a princess, Kate Middleton, again a princess, and now Meghan Markle. So it's hot, it's trendy. But this average June wedding in America, an average for this past month, according to the Bridal Extravaganza show, was $34,000. And the most expensive this year in June was in New York City at about $76,000. It is out of control, and not every woman is going to be Meghan Markle. Martina, what's going on?
I think it's crazy. I agree with you. It's the princess effect. I have a friend who's going through this right now with her daughter. She's getting married in what's considered to be the off season in October, and they're spending well over $100,000 for a destination wedding with 7 bridesmaids and a beautiful dress that's hand beaded and worth about, I think, $30,000 right there.
Mitch, you're in the videography game. I'm sure you have photographed many, many weddings.
Yeah, in spite of the fact that that isn't really my focus, we owned a lot of unique equipment. So the people in town that did all the high-end weddings would hire us to bring some of that to the event. I can tell you right now, I'm shocked that they say 76,000 is the highest in New York City. I've been to many that were 150,000.
Just for that month.
Yeah.
Just for that month.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I've seen $50,000 flowers. I've seen $30,000 cakes. I've seen dresses, as Martina pointed out, that cost $30,000 to $40,000. I mean, the videos that we would do at these things would run between $7,000 and $15,000. But I mean, it was like a production. We had 4 people, 4 cameras, all kinds of stuff going on. So it was a big project. So, yeah.
Well, for all of this money, does it keep a marriage together for life? This is the big rite of passage, and yet divorce rate, I don't think, has gone down, Mitch.
I can answer that. There have been times where before the wedding video was finished being edited, the phone call would come and say, don't bother. Because the marriage is already split. Yeah, it's really something. It's always been going up. But see, it's an emotional thing. I mean, I've watched people try to figure out where to cut costs, and you can't. This is the princess effect, as I believe Martina mentioned earlier, that you can't. I can tell you right now, the men will tell you you cannot have any kind of an opinion on any aspect of this. If you do, you're in trouble.
A relative of mine, I went to a wedding where a relative of mine said to the couple, "Look, I will give you $35,000 to $40,000 if you don't have this wedding extravaganza. I'll just give it to you. You want to go down to the judge? It wasn't a religious wedding either, by the way. You want to go down to the justice of the peace, have cake and coffee afterwards, no problem, and I will cut you a check right now." And they said no. It was on a beach. The sun had to shine this way. They're going to have umbrellas that they rented in case there was a little bit of rain. All of the drapery had to be a certain way. The flowers had to be a certain way. All of these dresses on the bridesmaids had to look exactly like the water. And it was this sort of greeny powder blue. It was over the top. And kind of stupid in a way, because thematically it kind of didn't work when they brought in all the country music band. It sort of wasn't, they had this kind of Dallas effect, but it was supposed to be Hawaii and beach. It was kind of strange. For me, I think maybe this is just because, well, maybe I'm older and wiser about these things, but I would have taken the money and run, right? Or I would have had a nice, simple ceremony and then spend it on honeymoon or new house or rent or whatever, Martina.
I agree. And I think this truly reflects the social media culture, because the first thing they do is post these beautiful photographs on Instagram or Facebook or Snapchat. And that's really what drives a lot of the cost, I think, is how beautiful everyone looks for that moment in time. And then maybe down the road, the marriage is over, but you have some beautiful photographs and you were a star in social media for that day.
And it might be worth noting that the length of engagement, according to the Houston Bridal Extravaganza show, which, by the way, folks, is America's largest bridal show, the length of engagement in America is 14 months. Is that enough time to have a solid marriage, Mitch? 14 months?
Well, I suppose that depends on the people. A lot of people will tell you that you don't really know the person until you do get married. A lot of people, have their persona, and then you find out what you've got after the fact. So I'm in favor of longer engagements. I think you get a chance to know more about the person. Personally, if I was a young person and somebody was going to spend $34,000 on my wedding, I realize this is not very, how should I say, sympathetic, but I think if the couple bought a house with that as a down payment, that they would certainly have a much better start in life.
Mm-hmm. Right. Martina?
Yeah, I think taking the money and spending it on something a little bit more sound, like the honeymoon or a great trip or something like that, would be a little bit more reasonable. But I don't think this is going to change anytime soon. I think we'll still see this princess effect continuing just because of the social media aspect.
Well, and because of royal weddings. I mean, there's always this pop to be just like a Kate Middleton or a Meghan Markle now. Maybe it's because Meghan Markle grew up in America, American actress. Maybe that's it. But not every young woman, or maybe not even young, will have a Givenchy couture long sleeve dress. And that's just the dress with beads. And then there's the flowers and there's the music and this humongous train that comes from the veil. One of the things that I was reading about from the Bridal Extravaganza show is that if you really want that photographic beauty, you got to be in an edifice, whether it's a church or town hall or wherever, where there's very narrow corridors. So you have to be very close to the person giving you away, and you walk very slowly so everybody can ooh and ah. It's all this planning for the dramatic effect, like you say, on social media, Martina.
Well, and to that end, I am looking at some of the facts from my friend's wedding. She just sent me an email and she said the band itself is costing her $25,000 for 3 hours. So I hope they play great music.
That's gouging.
It's ridiculous.
That's gouging.
That is gouging.
That's just gouging, right, Mitch?
Yeah, they do get a lot of money. I can tell you that. And photographers, by the way, have an easier time getting a large number than the video people do. And boy, having owned studios for both, I can tell you which one's easier. The video guys got a lot more gear and a lot more stuff to move and a lot more difficulty. And yet they struggle to get paid as much as the photographers.
I would like to be paid something to be a professional speaker at these weddings where whoever has the mic falls short. Pastors fall short. They don't know the couple, or if it's not a religious wedding, the father of the groom or the father of the bride, they stand up, they're half bombed. They don't have a good message. And for God's sake, quit giggling. Be sober enough to get through the messaging where you're really honoring the bride and the groom before you start drinking and fumble around with the mic. And is this working? Is this working? Ha, ha, ha. It's so annoying. Let's leave that alone and move on to another topic coming up on Think America with regard to dreams coming true, speaking of which, for employees at Disney in Anaheim. Be right back. Welcome back to Think America with Terry Gilberg. You can find all of our archive shows on thinkamericaradio.com. And there are the archive Change Your Life Technology segments as well. In Anaheim, California, there's a coalition of unions, and they have gathered over 20,000 signatures, which is more than enough for the November ballot, to require large employers who receive government subsidies to maintain a $15 minimum wage. All right. This would also be for the demand for the Walt Disney Company. So you might be surprised to know that Walt Disney, they receive federal tax breaks that function as subsidies. Did you know that? As incentives to boost economic growth. According to 2017 report from the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, it was the Walt Disney Company alone. They saved almost $1.5 billion over 8 years. So we all remember Bernie Sanders when he was on the campaign trail. He was also on the campaign trail in Anaheim, California. He joined forces with union representatives, and he demanded a minimum wage of $15 per hour, as opposed to the $11.25 per hour. And he said, quote, I want to hear the moral defense of a company that makes $9 billion in profits and gives minimum wage of $11.25 per hour. And he was pointing the finger right at the Walt Disney Company there in Anaheim. So Martina, starting with you, does the company that claims that it's in the business of making dreams come true actually do that with its own employees?
Well, I find this to be very interesting because where is the personal responsibility? Nothing says that a person needs to work there. And I don't think the problem is truly with Disney. Perhaps it's more of where the person lives. In other words, is it the state of California that's the issue because they take out so much money in taxes? I wonder if the same thing occurs at Disney World in Florida, where they have a much friendlier tax structure. So is it the amount of money that's paid, or is it the amount of money that's being taken out of the person's paycheck is what's driving some of the issues here? And again, nobody says you have to work there.
That's correct. And these are things that, you know, the average American doesn't hear from a politician. Bernie Sanders is not going to go into that little paragraph that you just gave all of us, because he's going to just be there with a megaphone pointing the finger and saying, if you can't make a minimum wage of $15 an hour, something is wrong with Disney, Mitch.
Well, Terry, frankly, I'm speechless. I mean, Bernie Sanders wants socialism. I'm just completely shocked. The thing about Bernie, he's got an advantage that a lot of people don't have. Numbers do not have to crunch for Bernie. I mean, this is the guy that wants to spend $32 trillion for free health care. I mean, there's not that much money in all of Christendom. I mean, reality doesn't settle in for this guy. I mean, this is the same guy that also gave Bob Iger props for canceling the Roseanne show. Well, that cost 300 jobs, buddy. I mean, you're either for jobs or you're not, which you can't have it both ways. But I do find it fascinating. Yes, I'm aware that Hollywood gets all kinds of subsidies. To me, this is ironic because Bob Iger is part of the Hollywood left, and he's getting some of his own medicine here.
Back to Bernie's point, he was talking about how folks can work at Disney for 30 years, 40 years, even 50 years, depending upon how old you are, and go hungry because you're still making $11.25 per hour. That's just not true. 50 years ago, you didn't make $11.25 an hour, to use the reverse on this. But that's what Bernie Sanders says. Disney said this about Sanders. Clearly doesn't have his facts right. Disneyland generates, quote, more than $5.7 billion annually for the local economy, and it's the area's largest employee, having added more than 11,000 jobs over the last decade, which is a 65% increase. So to Disney, they're also talking in generalities. They took it back a decade, not 40 years or 50 years. They pointed also to the new $1 billion Star Wars themed land that will create thousands of new jobs across multiple sectors. Disney's going to have something to look at. Disney isn't going to change. I don't care what Bernie Sanders says. They're still going to have entry-level jobs. They're still going to have people that want to work there and be part of that culture in Anaheim or even Florida for a very long time. Bernie Sanders can use this to rail and gnash his teeth, but it's not going to change. If the employee doesn't want to work there, the employee quits and goes somewhere else. So to Disney's point about pointing the finger back at Bernie, I think they do have a point. They have generated jobs, and chances are in California that minimum wage will now go up, but not by much, Martina.
I would agree. And I think this also exhibits the other issue, which is the amount of unskilled labor that comes into the state of California. These are supposed to be starter jobs, not living wage jobs. And I think that's another important distinction to make.
Good points all. We're going to wrap on there and hear what Megan has to say right after this on this very subject. Megan the Millennial will be with us. She'll also have Change Your Life technology. We're back on Think America. We've been talking with Terry's Talkers about Disneyland and whether or not dreams come true for employees the way they magically come true in fantasy Anaheim with Disneyland. Megan the Millennial is with us. What is your take on this? Bernie Sanders certainly pointing the finger to Disneyland. He wants minimum wage up from $11.25 an hour, 11 and a quarter per hour to $15 an hour. But I don't think it's going to change. Disneyland is a lot of entry-level jobs and a lot of unions, and that I think is the way it is. Maybe it'll go up a little bit, but I don't think Bernie is going to change that dynamic there.
$15 an hour. So what? What is that going to do for these people? That's not going to take someone out of poverty, Terry. And that's what always makes me laugh about these minimum wage increases is they really aren't meant for the jobs that are supporting families. They're meant for young people. I mean, the fact that he's talking about these young people who are Disney cast members living with each other or living in hotels, well, that's because they're young. That's what young people do. When they go to college, they live in dorms. When they start their first job, they're paid minimum wage or less than. And if you really want to change somebody's life, then you don't cap the minimum wage or you don't increase it to $15 an hour. That's not going to make a difference. This has always been my argument against this. It's a ridiculous and arbitrary thing. And one of the things that I have found that the super liberal left likes to do, they don't care about the result. They just care that it makes them feel good. That made them feel really good to pass a law that raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour. But they don't care about what the result is. That what it ends up doing is it ends up eliminating jobs. It ends up possibly increasing someone's tax liability. And this isn't going to make a big difference for people in California. The reason that the people who are in California are homeless is because there's too much regulation. The zoning board has effectively pushed out any kind of affordable housing, and this is not going to solve it. The one thing I do kind of like, though, Terry, is I like that the coalition who is advocating for this wants to basically target companies who are receiving any kind of subsidies or incentives from the government. Ooh, that makes my little heart flutter a little bit, just simply because I'm so sick and tired of crony capitalism. Unfortunately, it will not have the effect that I want. It will just have a chilling effect on hiring and affect the individuals. Disney may actually do an analysis on this, Terry. They may look at this and say, you know what? It's actually cheaper for us to stop taking tax dollars. I doubt that's going to be the case here because, of course, some of these pay scales are applying to just the entry-level positions, and there are more of the higher-level executive positions in Disney than there are the entry-level, and they may find that it's actually cheaper just to stick to the minimum wage.
What do you think of Disney taking a sheet from the playbook of McDonald's and showing these wonderful ads where young people are at McDonald's and then somebody gets accepted to college and rah, because McDonald's says we are for the entry-level worker, and here's the kid that gets his entry letter and he shares it with everyone in the kitchen. What do you think of that?
I think that's some great PR. I think that's the approach that they should take, because the whole point here is that we need to make sure that we keep entry-level jobs open to young people. We've spoken about this many times in the past shows, that the higher you raise the minimum wage, the less jobs we have for young people out there. So for somebody who is making $15, $20 an hour, we're not going to be hiring a high school student. I mean, these are entry-level jobs. They're working the stands at Disney World. They are characters at Disneyland. This is not a highly educated, highly skilled position. Keep them open for the young people. But I think that's a phenomenal publicity play. Yes, 100%.
I do too, and it really caught my eye in their ad, and the ad was effectively done. Maybe Disney can follow suit. All right, good discussion all. I think we're all kind of on the same page on that one. Megan, the Millennial, always does a cameo with Change Your Life Technology segment as she wraps up our show, sponsored by YourContractShop.com.
Yeah. So believe it or not, Terry, spider web silk is really strong. It's actually stronger than steel and tougher than Kevlar, and it can be stretched several times its length. Therefore, scientists have been working really hard studying it and attempting to replicate the spider webs. We've been working on this for decades now. We're finally starting to see a little bit of movement out of the University of Cambridge. They've created a new material that actually mimics spider silk's strength, stretchiness, and energy absorbing capacities. What's really interesting about this, Terry, is that the material is made up of 98% water. The other 2% accounts for silica and cellulose, but I can see this being applied to parachutes, bulletproof jackets, helmets, all kinds of stuff.
Find Megan at yourcontractshop.com and on Think America. I want to shout out to Mitch. Thank you for being on the program. A shout out to Martina. Shout out to all of our listeners. And of course, our national syndicator, Radio America, out of Washington, D.C. I'm Terry Gilberg. Till next time, reason first and then converse.